The holographic training room flickered, resolving into the shattered bridge of a Zalosian freighter. Static ghosted across the image, a spectral replay of a battle lost decades ago. Cadet analyst Kalen of the Third Fleet adjusted his optical sensors, his multifaceted eyes processing the data stream with the cool detachment of his species. The air hummed with the low thrum of the cruiser Vigilance, a sound that was supposed to be comforting, but today felt like a prelude to a storm. "Observe closely, cadets," Instructor Grix's voice boomed, the gravelly resonance of a Lorian who had seen too many conflicts. His large, reptilian form cast an imposing shadow over the console. "This is archive footage from the Cygnus X-1 incident, the first recorded contact between the Coalition and the species designated human." On the main screen, the Zalosian crew, elegant four-limbed beings of crystalline structure, moved with frantic grace. Alarms blared, their chimes discordant and panicked. A boarding party had breached their hull. The attackers were brutish, armored creatures Kalen had only studied in historical files, the now extinct Ryden marauders. "Standard boarding defense," Grix narrated, his clawed hand gesturing at the screen. The Zalosians held a choke point. They had superior numbers, superior technology. On board were 2 human observers, cultural exchange envoys. Non-combatants, note their positions here and here. 2 small, soft-skinned figures appeared, highlighted in green. They were cowering as any unarmed diplomat would. The Ryden smashed through the final barricade. Plasma bolts seared the air. One of the Zalosian defenders shattered, a cascade of glittering dust. Then it happened. A stray shot, a ricochet, clipped one of the humans in the shoulder. It was not a fatal wound, not even a debilitating one by the standards of most species. A red smear, shockingly bright against the pale human skin, blossomed on the envoy's uniform. "Mark the time," Grix commanded. A timer appeared in the corner of the hologram. A second human, the uninjured one, rushed to her partner's side. But the injured male pushed her away. His posture changed. The fear vanished, replaced by an unnerving stillness. His head lifted, and even through the grainy footage, Kalen could see the look in his eyes. It was flat, empty, predatory. The Ryden marauders did not understand what they had just done, Grix continued, his voice low. They saw a wounded creature. They saw prey. The human moved. He was not fast in the way a Cathar warrior was, nor strong like a Lorian brute. His movements were economical, brutally efficient. He picked up a fallen Zalosian sidearm. He did not seem to aim, yet 3 Ryden fell in as many seconds, each with a perfectly placed shot to their respiratory vents. He advanced into the corridor, ignoring the plasma bolts that sizzled past him. Another shot grazed his leg, leaving another trail of blood. He didn't even flinch. The second human was screaming at him, but he seemed not to hear. He acquired a discarded shock pike from a fallen marauder, using it to disable the energy shields of the remaining boarders before dispatching them with the sidearm. He moved through the freighter room by room, a silent, methodical angel of death. The Ryden, who had boarded with arrogant confidence, were now in a full-blown panic, their guttural roars turning to shrieks of terror. They were being hunted. "It took him 17 minutes to eliminate all 48 Ryden boarders," Grix stated flatly. "After the last one fell, he secured the bridge, initiated emergency repairs to the life support system, and then collapsed. Medical analysis later showed he had sustained 6 non-lethal wounds, lost over 30% of his blood volume, and was suffering from extreme shock. Yet he did not stop. He could not stop." The hologram faded, leaving Kalen and the other cadets in the dim light of the training room. The silence was heavy. This incident, and dozens like it that followed, led to the creation of Universal Military Doctrine 117. We know it by a simpler, more direct name: the Blood Protocol. The rule is absolute. Upon the confirmed shedding of human blood in a conflict zone, all opposing forces have 90 seconds to broadcast an unconditional surrender and cease all hostile action. If surrender is not viable, a full and immediate retreat is authorized and mandated. No exceptions, no questions. A nervous chittering came from a smaller insectoid cadet near the back. "Instructor, why? What is this state?" "The humans call it shock or an adrenaline surge," Grix explained. "Their own science does not fully comprehend it. Our xenobiologists have termed it primal persistent state." When injured, a human's higher cognitive functions appear to be rerouted. Fear, self-preservation, and complex emotional responses are suppressed. The brain becomes a hyper-focused tactical computer with a single, overriding objective: eliminate all perceived threats. They do not feel pain in the same way. They do not register fatigue until the threat is neutralized, at which point their bodies typically undergo catastrophic systemic failure. He paced before them, his heavy footfalls echoing. Do not mistake this for a simple berserker rage. A berserker is chaotic. A human in the persistent state is methodical. They will use cover. They will flank you. They will turn your own weapons against you. They will set traps. They will identify the chain of command and dismantle it. They are relentless, creative, and utterly without mercy. They are the perfect soldier, and it terrifies them as much as it terrifies us. Grix fixed his gaze on Kalen. Analyst, you have been assigned to the Mixed Species Infantry Division aboard this vessel. You will be serving alongside Sergeant Elias Vance. He is human. Your primary duty, above all tactical analysis and strategic recommendations, is to ensure the blood protocol is never, ever triggered. Do you understand the gravity of that responsibility? Kalen straightened his slender frame. Yes, instructor. The preservation of the human asset is paramount to mission integrity and the safety of all personnel. Grix let out a short, harsh laugh. Asset no, cadet. The human is not the asset. The protocol is. The human is the failsafe, the weapon of last resort we pray we never have to unsheath. Your job is to make sure that sword stays in its scabbard. Because if it is drawn, it will not be sheathed again until it is slick with the blood of your enemies. And sometimes, in the confusion, it has trouble telling friend from foe. The ship's corridors were a testament to the caution with which the coalition treated its human members. The flooring in the human habitation wing was made of a high-friction polymer to prevent slips. Tool and equipment racks had triple redundancy safety locks. Even the nutritional paste dispensers had pressure warnings to prevent accidental cuts from broken spouts. It was a vessel designed around the prevention of a single, specific type of accident. Kalen found Sergeant Elias Vance in the zero-gravity gymnasium, a vast, spherical chamber where crew members could exercise in a weightless environment. Vance was not using the magnetic grips or resistance cables. He was simply floating in the center of the sphere, eyes closed, his breathing slow and steady. He was of average size for his species, with dark hair cut short and a face that seemed etched with a permanent weariness, even in repose. Sergeant Vance, Kalen's voice was a soft series of clicks and whistles, translated into Terran standard by his vocalizer implant. Vance's eyes opened. They were a pale, watery blue. Analyst Kalen, welcome to the circus. He maneuvered himself with a small puff from his suit thrusters, floating over to the observation deck where Kalen stood. Don't mind me, just decompressing. Gravity feels heavy some days. I have reviewed your service record, Kalen said, his tone meticulously formal. 7 decorated tour, commendations for bravery on Cathar Prime and the Orion Gate skirmishes. You are a highly respected soldier. Vance offered a thin, humorless smile. They give you a medal for coming home in one piece, especially if you're human. It's an incentive for the rest of the squad to keep you that way. He looked at Kalen, his gaze direct. You've been through the briefing, I assume, seen the old vids, the one about the screaming diplomats. The Cygnus X1 incident, yes, it was illuminating. Illuminating, Vance repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. That's a polite way to put it. Let me give you the practical version, analyst. My job is to shoot straight and keep our people safe. Your job is to think 10 steps ahead. But our real job, yours and mine, is to make sure I don't get so much as a paper cut. Everything else is secondary. The state, the persistent state, Kalen began, his scientific curiosity overriding his decorum. Is it true that you have no memory of it, that you lose control? Vance's expression tightened. He ran a hand over his face. It's not about control. Imagine you're dreaming. You know you're in a dream, but you can't wake up. You're just a passenger. You watch your body do things, efficient things, terrible things. You see the fear in your allies' eyes. You see them aiming their weapons at you just in case. When it's over, you remember it in flashes like a badly cut film. The smell of scorched metal, the sound of something breaking, the look on the face of the last thing you neutralized. You don't lose control, Kalen, you lose yourself. A silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the ship's life support. Vance seemed to shrink in on himself, the decorated soldier replaced by a man carrying an immense burden. The other species, they look at us with a mix of awe and terror, Vance said quietly. They think we're some kind of living weapon. They think it's a gift, but it's a flaw in our wiring, a switch that flips and turns off everything that makes us us. It's a survival instinct that's too good at its job. It ensures the body survives, but it leaves a ghost behind to deal with the consequences. He pushed off the wall, floating back towards the center of the gym. Just keep me safe, analyst. That's all I ask, not for my sake. For everyone else's. Kalen watched him go, the human's words echoing in his mind. He had studied the protocol, understood its mechanics and its strategic implications. But for the first time, he was beginning to understand its cost. The blood protocol was not a shield for humanity, it was a cage, and every human in the coalition fleet was both its prisoner and its keeper. The call came 3 days later, a hull integrity alert from the outer maintenance ring, Section Gamma. It was a minor issue, a micrometeoroid impact that had knocked a communication relay out of alignment. A simple extravehicular activity, a spacewalk, was required to fix it. Sergeant Vance, as the senior engineering NCO on duty, was assigned to lead the two-person team. Kalen monitored from the command bridge, his station displaying the vitals of the EVA team. Vance and a young Lorian technician named Bix were tethered to the hull, moving with the practiced ease of veterans. The vastness of space was their backdrop, a canvas of black velvet dusted with distant, unblinking stars. "Relay is in sight," Vance's voice crackled over the comms, calm and professional. "Looks like a clean impact. Just need to reseat the power conduit and we'll be back inside for synth coffee." "Copy that, Sergeant," Bix's deeper voice rumbled. "Moving to secure your tether." On Kalen's screen, the two figures were small, almost insignificant against the immense curve of the Vigilance. He cross-referenced stellar charts, noting a faint trail of debris from the Uit cloud that was passing through the system. Standard procedure. The ship's shields could handle anything substantial. Smaller particles were a known, manageable risk. "Almost there," Vance reported. "Just a little, what the hell?" Suddenly, the proximity sensors on Kalen's console screamed. A new cluster of objects, too small to be tracked by long-range sensors, was sweeping towards the ship at incredible velocity. A secondary wave from the meteoroid stream. "EVA team, brace for impact," the bridge commander yelled. "Multiple small contacts, Vector 079er. It was too late. Kalen watched in horror as the space around Vance and Bix filled with a swarm of glittering, sand-sized particles. It was like flying through a cosmic hailstorm. Bix, with his naturally armored hide, grunted as the particles pinged harmlessly off his suit. Vance was not so lucky. One particle, barely larger than a grain of rice but traveling at thousands of kilometers per hour, struck the side of Vance's helmet. It wasn't a catastrophic breach. The helmet's self-sealing layer kicked in instantly, patching the tiny hole. But it wasn't instant enough. The particle had zipped through the outer layer, nicking the soft skin of Vance's cheek before being stopped by the inner plate. Inside the helmet, a single crimson droplet welled up. In the zero-gravity environment, it detached and floated, a perfect sphere of liquid ruby. Then it touched the helmet's interior surface, smearing. The biosensor threaded into the helmet lining, designed for this exact purpose, detected the biochemical signature of hemoglobin. On the bridge, every alarm panel turned a blinding, uniform red. A synthesized voice, calm and chillingly clear, echoed through the command center. "Warning! Blood protocol initiated. Human biosignature compromised. 90-second countdown engaged." A giant clock appeared on the main view screen, its numbers stark white against a blood-red background. 90, 89, 88. "Get them inside, now," the commander roared. Over the comm, Bix was frantic. "Sergeant, Vance, are you all right? Talk to me." There was no response from Vance. His vital signs on Kalen's monitor went haywire. Heart rate tripled. Adrenaline levels spiked to off-the-chart readings. Brain activity shifted, the frontal lobe dimming while the amygdala and cerebellum flared with incandescent light. Kalen zoomed in the external camera feed. Vance was motionless for a moment, his body rigid. Then he moved. He ignored Bix completely. He ignored the alarms. With a speed and precision that defied the cumbersome nature of his EVA suit, he turned back to the damaged relay. His hands moved in a blur, reconnecting the severed conduit. A shower of sparks erupted as he bypassed a fried circuit, manually forcing the connection. "Vance, what are you doing?" Bix cried, reaching for him. "We have to get back to the airlock." Vance didn't seem to hear. His body language was entirely different. There was no human hesitation, no wasted motion. He was a machine executing a task. The task, his brain had decided, was to fix the relay. That was the last command he had received before the trigger, and now it was his entire world. "All non-essential personnel, clear the corridors to Medbay 7, the commander ordered, his voice tight with tension. "Security teams, prepare Class 4 sedatives. Stand by at Airlock 3. Do not, I repeat, do not engage unless the subject shows aggression." On the screen, Vance finished the repair. The relay's indicator light blinked from red to green. Objective complete. He then turned and began moving towards the airlock, his movements still unnaturally fluid. He was pulling himself along his tether hand over hand, twice as fast as any normal human could. "He's coming in," Bix reported, his voice shaky. "He's not responding to me. His eyes, by the first star, his eyes." The countdown on the screen reached 0. It was replaced by a single, stark warning, "Protocol active." Vance reached the airlock and cycled it open with brutal efficiency. When the inner door opened, a security team was waiting, weapons raised but pointed at the floor. They were clad in heavy armor, a mix of Lorians and heavily built synthetics. Vance stepped out of the airlock and stood still, his helmet hiding his face. The only sound was his own ragged breathing over the internal comms. There was no enemy. There was no threat. His objective, fix the relay, was complete. The protocol had no further instructions. He just stood there, a loaded weapon with no target. Kalen could feel the tension on the bridge coil into a singularity. Every officer was holding their breath. What would it do now? The squad leader, a towering Lorian, took a hesitant step forward. "Sergeant Vance, Elias, the situation is secure. You can stand down." Vance's head tilted, a bird-like inquisitive motion. He was processing, assessing. The Lorian was not a threat. The crew was not a threat. The ship was not a threat. His body, having fulfilled its primary directive and finding no new ones, finally registered the massive biological strain it was under. With a shuddering gasp that was audible over the comm, Vance's legs buckled. He collapsed to the deck, unconscious before he even hit the ground. The medical team swarmed in, their instruments whirring. They carefully removed his helmet. Kalen watched on the internal feed as they revealed Vance's face. The cut on his cheek was trivial, a thin red line already beginning to scab. But his face was pale as death, and his eyes, though closed, seemed sunken, as if he had just lived a lifetime in the span of 2 minutes. Kalen let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. His manipulators trembled as he logged the incident report. Classification: accidental protocol trigger. Resolution: subject self-neutralized post-objective completion. Casualties: 0. He looked at the footage again. He had seen the protocol engaged without an enemy present. It was not mindless rage. It was an unbreakable, terrifying focus. A biological switch that turned a man into an instrument, dedicated solely to the last coherent thought in his head. And Kalen knew, with a certainty that chilled his crystalline core, that if that last thought had been survive or attack, the sterile corridors of the Vigilance would now be a slaughterhouse. The mission briefing came a week after Vance was cleared for duty. They were being rerouted to the Kepler 186 system, a contested zone on the edge of Coalition space. A scientific outpost on the 5th planet, a resource-rich but tectonically unstable world named LV-817, had gone silent. The timing was suspicious. The Cathar, an insectoid species with a hive-mind consciousness and a belligerent expansionist policy, had recently laid claim to the entire system. "Intel suggests a Cathar scout fleet is in the system," Commander Eva Rostova, a human with silvering hair and eyes like chips of granite, addressed the assembled officers on the bridge. "Their official stance is sovereign patrol, Our stance is that our people on LV-817 are non-combatants in need of aid. We're going in." Kalen felt a prickle of unease. The Cathar were notorious for their rigid, logic-driven approach to warfare. They viewed concepts like honor or fear as inefficient variables. They respected strength and nothing else. "What about the protocol, Commander?" a Xylosian navigation officer asked, the question hanging in the air. "The Cathar are aware of the blood protocol," Rostova said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "They have access to the same public coalition doctrines as everyone else. They are a logical species. They will understand the strategic disadvantage of triggering it. We will proceed with a standard extraction. Sergeant Vance, your fire team will be on point." Vance, standing beside Kalen, merely nodded. He looked rested, but the weariness behind his eyes was deeper now. The accidental trigger had left its mark. The dropship descent through LV-817's turbulent atmosphere was rough. The planet was a canvas of rust-colored deserts and jagged, black mountains, all of it shrouded in a perpetual ochre haze. Vance's team consisted of himself, two other humans, Corporal Shaw and Private Reyes, a Lorian heavy weapons specialist named Grak, and Kalen, who was to provide real-time tactical analysis from the field. The outpost was situated in a narrow canyon, a small cluster of prefabricated domes that should have been blazing with lights. Instead, they were dark and silent. "No power signatures, no comms," Kalen reported, his optical sensors scanning the area. "My readings suggest the primary reactor went offline 12 hours ago. Life support would have failed shortly after." "Doesn't feel right," Grak rumbled, his heavy plasma repeater held at the ready. "Cathar don't just turn the power off. They dismantle things." They moved in formation, sweeping through the silent outpost. The signs of a struggle were everywhere. Doors were torn from their hinges. Equipment was smashed, but there were no bodies. Not of the scientists, nor of any attackers. "It's a trap," Vance whispered over their private comm channel. "They cleared the board, they're waiting for us. Kalen, can you get a read on hostiles?" "The canyon walls are rich in ferrous metals, it's scrambling my short-range scanners," Kalen replied, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "There could be 1,000 of them out there, and I wouldn't know until they were on top of us." The premonition proved true a moment later. From hidden crevices and shallow graves in the ruddy soil, the Cathar erupted. They were nightmarish figures, a meter tall, with chitinous black exoskeletons and 4 scythe-like limbs. They swarmed forward, their movements perfectly synchronized, a river of clicking, hissing death. "Contact!" Vance yelled. "Fall back to the dropship. Reyes, Shaw, suppressive fire. Grak, give 'em hell." The canyon exploded with light and sound. Human pulse rifles spat coherent light, while Grak's repeater unleashed waves of incandescent plasma that turned the Cathar warriors to steaming slag. But for everyone that fell, 3 more seemed to take its place. They were relentless, a tide of bodies whose only purpose was to overwhelm them. They were being pushed back, step by step. A Cathar warrior, moving with blinding speed, leaped over their defensive line and slashed at Reyes. The young private cried out as the creature's clawed limb tore through her body armor, leaving a deep gash across her side. The crimson of her blood was stark against the dark gray of her uniform. She stumbled back, clutching the wound. Immediately, Kalen's helmet display lit up with the dreaded red overlay. A universal broadcast signal was sent out on all coalition frequencies. "Warning! Blood protocol initiated. Cease all hostiles. Surrender or retreat. 90 seconds. Grak, the Lorian, reacted instantly. He roared not in aggression but in command. "Fall back, full retreat, form a perimeter around the wounded. Do not let the Cathar near her." His training took over, overriding the instinct to fight. The protocol was absolute. On the Cathar command carrier in low orbit, Hive Marshal Cathokvar processed the transmission. Its multifaceted eyes regarded the tactical display. The human forces were pulling back, trying to shield one of their wounded. It was an illogical maneuver, sacrificing a superior tactical position for a single, damaged unit. "The human superstition," Cathokvar communicated to its subcommanders via neural link. "They believe their wounded are somehow sacred. This is a weakness. Their adherence to this protocol is a flaw in their strategy. Press the attack. Eliminate the wounded unit first. The rest will break." A confirmation chime echoed through the hive mind. The order was given. On the surface of LV-817, the Cathar warriors did not slow down. They ignored the blaring warnings, the universal signal of truce. They surged forward, their target now the bleeding, stumbling Private Reyes. Vance saw it happen. He saw the Cathar ignore the protocol. He saw their focus shift to his wounded Marine. "They're not stopping," he screamed into the comms. "They're violating the protocol. Kalen, get back to the ship. That's an order." But it was too late. Private Reyes, who had been moaning in pain, suddenly went quiet. She pushed away the hand of Corporal Shaw, who was trying to apply a medi-patch. She stood up straight, her movements stiff, unnatural. The look of pain on her face was gone, replaced by the same terrifying emptiness Kalen had seen in the archive footage. Her head snapped up, her eyes locking onto the advancing swarm of aliens. The 90-second timer hit 0. Reyes did not scream, she did not roar, she simply moved. She unslung her pulse rifle, firing not in panicked bursts but in single, measured shots. Pop, pop, pop. With each sound, a Cathar warrior fell, a neat, smoking hole drilled through its primary nerve ganglion. She began to advance, walking directly into the oncoming horde. "Reyes, no!" Shaw yelled, reaching for her. She didn't respond. A Cathar lunged, its side limb swinging. Reyes dropped, letting the attack whistle over her head. As she came up, she drew her combat knife and severed the creature's leg at the joint. As it fell, she put a single rifle round through its head before continuing her advance. Kalen watched, frozen, his analytical mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This wasn't a soldier fighting. This was an exterminator at work. Reyes moved through the battlefield with a preternatural awareness. She used the bodies of the fallen Cathar as cover. She ricocheted shots off canyon walls to hit targets hiding behind rocks. Her movements were a ballet of death, precise and economical and utterly inhuman. The Cathar, for the first time, seemed to hesitate. Their hive-mind logic was failing them. Their models predicted a wounded soldier should be weak, disorganized. This was a monster, a demon clad in human flesh. Their coordinated attack began to falter, breaking into panicked individual actions. And Reyes picked them off one by one. "What is she doing?" Grack whispered in awe and horror, his plasma repeater forgotten in his hands. "She's winning," Vance said, his voice grim. He knew he had to contain this. He had to manage the whirlwind. Shaw Grack lay down a kill box on her flanks. "Don't let them surround her. Kalen, give me their command structure. Who's in charge down here?" Kalen's mind snapped back into focus. He forced himself to see Reyes not as a person, but as a tactical element. An unstoppable one. The larger units with the cranial ridges, they appear to be directing the others. There are 3 of them. "Reyes," Vance broadcast on her open channel, knowing she likely wouldn't hear the words, but the protocol-driven part of her brain might process the data. "Target designators Alpha, Beta, Gamma. Prioritize." He highlighted the Cathar commanders on her HUD. Reyes's path instantly changed. She ignored the lesser drones swarming around her, taking hits from their energy weapons that smoked and seared her uniform but didn't slow her down. She moved with singular purpose towards the first commander. The Hive Marshal Cathar watched its forces being dismantled by a single, wounded soft skin. The data flowing back from its warriors was chaotic, filled with a primal emotion the Cathar had no word for. It was a statistical anomaly that defied all logic. "Send in the Royal Guard," the Marshal commanded. "This affront cannot be allowed to stand. Eradicate the anomaly." On the planet's surface, a new wave of Cathar appeared. These were larger, faster, armed with superior weaponry. They descended on Reyes's position. In the crossfire, a plasma bolt meant for the relentless human soldier went wide, catching Sergeant Vance high on the chest plate. The energy blast blew him backwards, cracking the ceramic armor and searing the flesh beneath. A deep, ragged burn smoldered on his shoulder, and from it, fresh human blood welled up, spilling down his front. Kalen's blood ran cold, a nonsensical phrase he'd learned from humans that suddenly made perfect, chilling sense. Grack let out a low moan of despair. On the battlefield, there were now 2. The transformation in Vance was instantaneous. The pain, the shock, the concern for his soldiers, it all vanished. He rose to his feet, his movements mirroring Reyes's in their unnatural precision. He took in the tactical situation in a single, cold glance. He and Reyes were in the center, the Cathar were closing in, and his remaining two squad mates were vulnerable. He didn't even look at Reyes, but they began to move in perfect, unspoken synchronization. It was as if their minds were linked, two nodes in a single, lethal network. Reyes continued her relentless forward assault on the Cathar commanders, while Vance became the ultimate defender. He moved to intercept the Royal Guard, his pulse rifle a blur of motion. He fought not like a man, but like a force of physics. He used the Cathar's own aggressive momentum against them. When one lunged, he would pivot, using its body as a shield against another's attack before eliminating them both. He dismantled their formations, herding them into Grax's line of fire, creating bottlenecks and kill zones with an instinctual brilliance that no training could replicate. Kalen was trying to provide tactical updates, but his models were useless. He couldn't predict their movements because they weren't based on strategy. They were based on a predatory, three-dimensional understanding of geometry, violence, and threat assessment. He was watching two masters of warfare paint a masterpiece of carnage. They're protecting us, Corporal Shaw stammered, watching Vance single-handedly hold off a dozen of the Cathar elite. At one point, a Cathar warrior broke through the line, scuttling towards Kalen's position behind a rock outcropping. Kalen raised his sidearm, but he knew he was too slow. Suddenly, Vance was there. He had seemingly appeared from nowhere. He dispatched the Cathar with a brutal efficiency that was terrifying to behold up close. For a brief second, his pale blue eyes, now flat and devoid of recognition, met Kalen's. There was no sign of Elias Vance in that gaze. It was the look of a calculator that had just solved an equation. It assessed Kalen, categorized him as non-threat allied asset, and then dismissed him, turning back to the battle without a flicker of emotion. The close proximity to that cold, inhuman focus was more terrifying than the entire Cathar army. Meanwhile, Reyes had reached the last Cathar commander. It fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, but it was no match for the human's protocol-driven fury. Reyes disarmed it, broke its primary limbs, and then, with cold finality, ended it. With the command structure eliminated, the remaining Cathar drones fell into disarray, their hive-mind connections severed. They began to scuttle back, a disorganized retreat. But the protocol was not about retreat. It was about eliminating the threat. From his orbital command ship, Hive Marshal Cathokvar watched its ground forces break. Its logical mind could not reconcile the data. Two damaged units had routed a force 100 times their size. This was not warfare, it was a plague. The experiment is a failure, the Marshal broadcast to the Hive. The human variable is too chaotic. Sanitize the planet, deploy the orbital plasma cannon, erase the anomaly. The underbelly of the Cathar cruiser began to glow, a malevolent orange eye opening in the sky. Orbital bombardment incoming, Kalen screamed, his sensors picking up the massive energy spike. We have less than a minute. There was nowhere to run. The canyon offered no shelter from an attack of that magnitude. It was over. But Vance and Reyes were still moving. Their objective had not changed: eliminate all threats. And the glowing spot in the sky was now the biggest threat on the board. In unspoken agreement, they both began sprinting towards a large piece of Cathar technology left behind in the retreat, a mobile anti-air emplacement, its power core still humming. They reached it together. Reyes began targeting the orbital cannon, her hands flying across the controls with an intuitive understanding of the alien technology. Vance stood guard, his rifle methodically picking off the last few retreating Cathar, ensuring nothing could interfere. They worked with the seamless, terrifying efficiency of a single organism with two bodies. "They can't possibly get that thing working in time," Shaw said, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. But they did. With seconds to spare, the emplacement whined to life. Reyes locked on. A lance of pure energy shot into the sky, a thin blue line connecting the dusty canyon floor with the heavens. It struck the Cathar command ship not on its heavily armored hull, but directly in the focusing lens of the plasma cannon. The resulting feedback loop was catastrophic. The orange glow on the ship's belly intensified, then imploded. A chain reaction of explosions ripped through the vessel. For a moment, It hung in the sky like a new, dying star, before it began its fiery, silent descent into the planet's atmosphere, breaking apart as it fell. The primary threat was neutralized. On the ground, the silence was absolute. The last of the Cathar warriors had been eliminated. The sky was clear. The battle was over, and with their objective complete, the two humans stopped. As one, Reyes and Vance swayed on their feet. Their bodies, held together for the last 15 minutes by nothing more than a primal, biological imperative, finally gave out. They collapsed into the red dust, twin heaps of broken armor and bleeding flesh. The spell was broken. The medevac team found a scene of utter devastation. The canyon floor was littered with the chitinous remains of over 200 Cathar warriors, including their elite royal guard. And in the center of it all, two unconscious humans, their bodies riddled with wounds that should have killed them 10 times over. Kalen stood over the spot where Vance had saved him, his mind a maelstrom of conflicting data and emotions. He had studied the blood protocol as a strategic doctrine, a set of rules to be followed. He had witnessed its accidental trigger as a frightening but contained anomaly. Now he had seen it violated. He had seen it truly unleashed. And he understood. The protocol was not a rule of engagement created by the coalition to protect its human soldiers. It was a warning, a plea codified into military law for the sanity and survival of anyone who would dare face them. It was a leash humanity had willingly placed on itself, begging the rest of the galaxy not to force them to unleash the monster that slept within their very blood. Back on the Vigilance, the medbay was quiet, filled with the gentle hum and hiss of advanced medical equipment. Private Reyes was in a medically induced coma, her body undergoing extensive regeneration. Sergeant Vance was awake, staring at the sterile white ceiling. Kalen stood in the doorway, hesitant to enter. "It's all right, analyst," Vance's voice was raspy weak. "You can come in, I don't bite, usually." Kalen entered, his footsteps soft on the deck plating. "How are you feeling, Sergeant?" "Like I went 10 rounds with a gravity hammer," Vance admitted. "They told me what happened, Reyes and me, the ship." He closed his eyes. "I remember bits, flashes, the color of Cathar blood, the whine of that cannon charging up. It's like watching a movie of someone else's life." He looked at Kalen, his blue eyes clear now but haunted. Did we?" "You saved us," Kalen finished for him, his voice soft. "All of us. The footage from my helmet recorder is already legendary. 2 humans against a Cathar battalion. You routed them. You destroyed their command ship." Vance didn't look proud, he looked ill. "How many?" "The official count is 217 Cathar casualties." A long, heavy silence filled the room. Vance turned his head to look out the viewport at the swirling starfield beyond. 217, he whispered, "all because one of them broke a rule they didn't understand." "They understand it now," Kalen said. He stepped closer. "We received a transmission from the Cathar hive. They have surrendered, not just to our fleet but across the entire sector. They have ceded all contested systems, including Kepler 186. They sent one message unencrypted for all to hear." Vance looked at him, a question in his weary eyes. It said, "We have encountered the primal, we yield." Vance let out a dry, rattling laugh that turned into a grimace of pain. "The primal. I guess that's what we are. The thing in the dark that the other monsters are afraid of." He sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. "This isn't a gift, Kalen, it's a curse. We walk around in these fragile, soft bodies, and everyone else in the galaxy handles us like we're made of glass. But they're not afraid the glass will break. They're afraid of what comes out when it does." "I believe I am beginning to comprehend," Kalen said. "I have always perceived the universe through the lens of logic, of data and predictable outcomes. But what you and Private Reyes did, it defies logic. It was something more fundamental." "It's survival," Vance said. "An old piece of our evolutionary code that refuses to die. Back on Earth, for millions of years, we were the prey. We were small and weak, and everything wanted to eat us. So we developed this switch. The ability to keep fighting, even when we should be dead, just to give the rest of the tribe a chance to escape. We civilized ourselves, built starships, learned to talk to people like you, but the switch is still there, waiting." He met Kalen's gaze. "That's why we need you, all of you, Lorians, Xylosians, everyone. You keep us civilized. You keep us from having to flip that switch. You are the buffer between us and the things that would make us become that. A new understanding dawned on Kalen. Humanity's place in the coalition was not just as soldiers or diplomats. They were a living deterrent, a strategic asset of unimaginable power. But they were also a species so terrified of their own potential that they had integrated themselves with others, seeking a community that would protect them from themselves. Their reputation was their greatest shield and their most isolating prison. The footage from the battle, Kalen said, has been classified at the highest security level. It is being incorporated into the Blood Protocol training module for every soldier and officer in the Coalition fleet. He paused. Your actions and the Cathar's violation have just become the new definitive lesson on why the protocol must never be broken. Vance closed his eyes again, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. So we're cautionary tailies now. Bogeymen, tell the cadets to do their jobs or the humans will get you. He fell silent for a long time. Just make sure they listen, Kalen. Make sure they all listen. Later, Kalen stood on the observation deck, looking out at the endless starscape. He pulled up a galactic chart, the glowing map of familiar systems and alien territories. His manipulators keyed in a search, and a tiny, insignificant star system was highlighted in the Orion arm. Sol system, Terra, Earth, the birthplace of this strange, paradoxical species. So peaceful in their daily lives, so dedicated to cooperation, yet carrying within their very veins a fire that could burn down the galaxy. They were feared, respected, and deeply, profoundly lonely. And as Kalen looked at that small point of light, he finally understood the single, unspoken truth that underpinned all of galactic politics. A truth now seared into the collective consciousness of the Cathar hive and every other species that had witnessed humanity's terrible potential. Do not make them bleed.